Jim, can you tell me a bit about the work that you're heading into?
The work I'm heading into. Well, I think a lot of us would know just from reading in the newspapers and that over the last number of years, the whole question of mental health, spirituality, resilience amongst not just people in the military, but aid workers, people in healthcare, first responders, people who work in the correctional system has become more and more of a concern. And there's been, the creation of various positions and programs. And I think that one of the strange things that's happened is that it seems like even though perhaps church communities are not as strongly attended as they once were in a changing world, there's been kind of an increase in demand for what I'm going to call spiritual care. And so in the first responder world and in the world of the military, along with mental health and physical health and a whole bunch of other things, there's been this growing awareness of spiritual care, spiritual perspective, and the historic role of a chaplain in an organization is to be the person who's not part of management, not in the military, like not a active duty soldier, but who is part of the organization and identifies with the organization, dresses in a way that they look like they're part of the organization, and they spend their time being present among, in this case, first responders. So getting to know the people on the front line, getting to know their families, and being available just to talk, maybe to do some, teaching about spiritual health, to support people in crisis, but also to help connect people to resources. So to be kind of like the bridge to helping people get to the care resources they need. And I think it's a tribute to the progressiveness of Delta, to both the police and fire department, that they realize that there's a need for this expanded, because Delta Police has had a chaplain for some years. Delta Fire hasn't, and there's this role for kind of an expanded program and a place. And I think however one understands things happen, whether it's the Spirit of God or the stars aligning, at the point that I was interested in that, these departments were interested in that, and because they know me and I know them and I know a number of the members, and I've been in the military, so I have a understanding of paramilitary culture, that this opportunity has come. And it's there are various forms of chaplaincies in the police world and the fire world. There's as far as we know, no position in the Lower Mainland where somebody's doing both police and fire. It works here, I think, because this is a small community and the departments both know each other. Some places, some fire departments have firefighters who are also trained as ministers doing that kind of work. This is a little different in terms of it is a half-time position, and there's a regularity hours, and it's not so much, it's not sort of, okay, well, we have this problem, we're going to hire somebody to come in for particularly the problem. I'm going to kind of work really hard to get to know people and become part of the fabric. Now, other than that, there's a lot of unknowns, because we're kind of, my favorite phrase recently, we're kind of making the road as we walk here. Well, so one of the first things to say is that it's very clear, and it's actually written into the documents around this position, as it would be in all chaplaincy positions in a multi-faith society, that the primary responsibility is not proselytizing. So my job is not to go in and to make to be talking all the time about the Christian gospel and trying to, whatever language you use, convert people or affiliate people to the gospel. It is a ministry of presence and care. So it's based heavily on listening. It's based heavily on getting to know people. It's not to say that if somebody wanted to know something about Christianity, I would be able to talk about that. But in the military that I was in for 26 years, we used the phrase like that the role of you facilitate the worship of people of your own faith. No, you provide spiritual care. How do we do that now? It's been a while since I retired. Basically, you facilitate the spirituality of or worship of Christians, if you're a Christian chaplain. You make it possible for the other groups of faith in a military setting to practice their faith as they see fit. So, for example, as a Christian chaplain, when I was deployed in Afghanistan, knowing that we had Jewish and Muslim people in our deployment, we took resources for those people so that when a Jewish holiday came along and there were some Jewish soldiers out in a fob, we could take those resources out to them, and we would make connections in the Kandahar camp, or Kandahar city as it was at that point, and work with our chain of command to make sure that if a Muslim soldier wanted to go to prayers on a Friday, that the chain of command knew that that was important to them. And then we add the phrase, but we care for all. And, all across the, it's like a little bit like saying, all of the great religions have some variation of the golden rule. And the questions we have as human beings that are spiritual about, who am I and what's the purpose of my life, those are things we hold in common. And so to be a presence in the midst of that is a challenge, because you have to give up that sense of proselytizing, and you have to kind of be comfortable to live in a world that's a bit grayer, where answers aren't as clear and not everybody necessarily believes the same thing, but also to trust that in the midst of that, I'll still be personally energized by my own faith tradition, but in the midst of that, my job really is just to care for all those people in the department, whatever religious perspective they have, and their families. So it's kind of makes sense when it's all written down, but in reality, it's a sort of a I'm going to be feeling my way as I go along. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's going to be interesting to for people to get to know you in this different kind of way.
Yeah.
You've served in the military for so many years that this has been your experience, and you've developed relationships with lots and lots of folks in the Canadian Armed Forces over those decades of your service. But for many in Delta, this is going to be the first time getting to know you in a chaplaincy role. You've served as a chaplain for decades. Well,
and in reality, I think in Ladner, I've also in many ways served as a chaplain. I mean, many of the people that I've helped or I've done funerals for, I never say to someone, well, are you a card-carrying Christian? Or I never say to anyone, well, you're not a member of my church. The whole, if you look at it this way, the whole emphasis of Jesus was to give and to include, right? I don't ever remember Jesus saying to somebody who, didn't look like a really well turned out church attender that he didn't have anything to do with them. So I take that as my model, and I figure that in any community where Jesus found himself with a whole bunch of people from other faith groups and other religions, he'd be very respectful, very inclusive, and willing to listen. And I don't think he'd be shoving religion down their throat, right? And I think he would care, and I think that's what the role of a chaplain is. And it's a different role than someone who has that primary gift of evangelism, if we look at the scripture, or someone whose job it is or call it is to go into a community and to plant a Christian church. So it's different, but it's still an important part of the ministry.
Awesome. It's really exciting. It'll be neat to see how that starts to shape and be formed.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited. I'm a bit nervous, but so far, I've had some meetings and I'm getting fitted out for some stuff, and we're having some conversations, and I'm both excited and really honored to be chosen to do this. So,
fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.